We have been lied to. Not by Afton and their empty promises, not by Patient 46 with their creepy silence, nor by Vanessa and her creepy white lady vibe. Not by Scott, not by Steel Wool, not by PewDiePie. No, we were lied to by the most insidious, horrible monster the FNAF community has ever known. A being so evil the mere mention of their name causes spring lock failures within a 20-mile vicinity. I'm talking, of course, about MatPat. By now, most fans of Five Nights at Freddy's Security Breach are familiar with the code on the wall of the sister location room. It was a monumental effort, but Dawko and a team of codebreakers managed to crack it shortly after release. What we ended up with was a very strange piece of writing, and there's been immense speculation on the topic ever since. In part 1 of MatPat's Security Breach movie, we are presented the code as follows.
Quote, "Break and mend, I built the breath. They hunt now, drawn to life. Not real, still me. And FRIT and fraught with thought and zest and guessed no blunt woes. Dodge, duck, flash, shoot, crawl, run, crush the vile band. Cry not, try not, do not hold out hope. Your life, your aim will save those with soul."
Since then, a post to r/Game Theory alleged that the line "still me" should actually be "still keen," which has generally been accepted by the community. While this change seems really minor, if you think about it, it would invalidate one of the strongest pieces of evidence that the author of the code is Michael Afton, who is widely believed to be residing within Glamrock Freddy. So while that is an error, it's not actually that big a deal. I didn't spend time deciphering the code. Like MatPat, I just took what Dawko and the others produced for granted. Ironically, the much more interesting thing about the way MatPat displays the code is the punctuation. If you pay attention to how the code is deciphered, one thing should immediately become apparent. There isn't any way to place periods or commas. The lines we see in MatPat's video are presumptive. We don't know if they're correct. And upon further analysis, I've discovered a couple of interesting, alternate ways to read the code. If accurate, these interpretations could potentially shed light on the current dark spots in the FNAF lore. The very first line has been popularly interpreted as, "Break and mend, I built the breath. They hunt now, drawn to life." However, if we just get rid of this period, we get, "Break and mend, I built the breath they hunt." This actually works. "I built the breath they hunt" totally fits in with the Gregbot theory. If Gregory is a robot, then someone built him. This also potentially opens up a few new possibilities for who they could be. Presumably, it refers to the Glamrocks, but it could be William Afton or perhaps even Michael. The only thing we can say for certain is that if Gregory is indeed a robot, there is a strong possibility that the author of this message built him. Calling this poem purple prose would be an understatement, but even then, if we can rearrange the punctuation so that the resulting sentences aren't so Yoda-like, it would strengthen any theories based around the code. After that, we have a couple places to end the sentence, but it isn't super important. "I built the breath they hunt" works, but I actually prefer "I built the breath they hunt now." It's a little bit awkward, but it lets us avoid starting the next sentence with "now," comma, which is even more awkward. MatPat places this period after the word life, resulting in the weird fragmented sentence, "not real, still keen." Though as mentioned before, at the time we allegedly mistranslated that line as me. Still, whether we use me or keen, the sentence just feels weird and out of place. I believe this is how we should be interpreting the message thus far. "Break and mend, I built the breath they hunt now. Drawn to life, not real." There it is. Drawn to life, not real makes perfect sense. It removes the weird fragment and it potentially recontextualizes the message. If we continue with the popular notion that drawn to life means attracted to life, this sentence describes something that is being drawn towards a life that isn't real. It could also mean that they're drawing attention to the fact that you probably aren't subscribed. Please consider clicking the subscribe button. Every time I get a sub notification, it makes my day. The drawn to life, not real line syncs up suspiciously well with the idea that the Glamrock animatronics are being drawn to Gregory, who, as a robot, fits in with the idea of a life that isn't real. That said, there are a few suspects. The animatronics just come to mind first. Still keen and FRIT and fraught with thought and zest and jest. Again, this was the line that was apparently incorrectly decoded as "still me." I kinda liked "still me" because it could have connected back to the whole "it's me" thing from earlier games, but it doesn't, because apparently it's keen. Trying to punctuate this list of rhymes is basically impossible. The thing is written like a where clause in a SQL query, so we're just gonna leave it like this. Fortunately, as a result of the work we did earlier reparsing the first sentence, we can now interpret this sentence as referring to the one who is being hunted, perhaps Gregory. This is crucial because in the interpretation that MatPat presented, this line could be referring to the ones doing the hunting. This reinterpretation removes that ambiguity, which becomes really important for the rest of the message. This part sounds really crazy, but with our new updated punctuation, it becomes pretty straightforward once you know what each word means. I, and I assume most others, interpreted keen as referring to consciousness and awareness. FRIT is an old school way to refer to fright in the past tense. FROUGHT usually describes generalized anxiety, panic, or desperation. It can also refer to a situation that leads to an undesirable result. We all know what thought means, and zest refers to happiness, joy, enthusiasm, excitement, those kinds of things. A jest refers to a tale of adventure, like a quest. Historically, it refers to the old tales of gallant knights in shining armor and that kind of stuff. So, to be keen and frit and fraught with thought and zest and jest implies that the subject of the message is aware, they're afraid, or in a tense situation. Still, their mind is filled with hopes and enthusiasm for some great mission they feel obligated to undertake. This aligns perfectly with Gregory, even if he isn't a robot. However, him being a robot only makes it line up more. I interpret it as describing how terrified Gregory would have been when he awoke or found himself, a process that is surely akin to what we witnessed Glamrock Freddy experience during the Afton ending. I've separated no blunt woes into its own sentence just for comprehension reasons. As for what it means, I'm really not sure. Literally, it would mean something like no straightforward problems, but I have no clue. If you have any ideas for this line, let me know in the comments. The next line is really straightforward. I mostly agree with MatPat's parsing, though I would end the sentence after the word run and leave the crush the vile band as a fragment. A semicolon would work too, I guess, so let's go with that. Obviously, this describes all the actions that Gregory takes throughout the game. Dodging security, ducking under stuff, flashing the Phaz cam, shooting the Phaser blaster, crawling through vents, running from everything. It clearly describes Gregory. This is another reason I prefer my parsing of the message. In addition to reading more normally, I believe it allows us to make a more comprehensible lore connection. We added a period after run, so crush the vile band now stands unto itself as a fragment. I know I mentioned before that I don't like fragments, but this one works well because it's such a punctuated statement. Obviously, it refers to destroying the Glamrock animatronics, the vile band, which is further evidence that the subject of this message is Gregory. The message ends with the lines, "Cry not, try not, do not hold out hope." Wow, what a punctuation nightmare. Honestly, the easiest way to fix this is to change a lot of the commas to periods. Cry not, try not, do not hold out hope. That works. This line is the first indication that whoever wrote this code is dealing with some sort of inner struggle. Cry not are words of motivation. Don't cry, be brave, you can do this. However, try not implies don't even try, don't bother, it's hopeless. This is punctuated by do not hold out hope. That's just not a phrase anybody would say, ever. You either tell someone to hold out hope or you tell them to give up in despair. You don't say do not hold out hope. It could just be weird FNAF speak, but it sort of looks like two personalities are fighting with each other as the message is being written. It would explain why the language is so jarring and stilted. It might also explain why the person had to write the message in code despite it being so well hidden. One person sharing two personalities. Where have we seen that idea suggested before? Your life, your aim will save those with soul. This is a very strange sentence grammatically. I understand why MatPat punctuated it the way they did. The alternatives are really awkward. Breaking it up into two sentences like your life, your aim will save those with soul is technically correct, but it leaves us with this random your life fragment. I don't believe that could possibly be correct. I do think that MatPat read this sentence the way that it was intended to be, I just don't know how to write it. That pause between aim and will is hard to represent. You could maybe do your life, your aim will save those with soul. Regardless, none of these different methods of parsing this sentence really change the meaning, so let's just go with it. I believe this ties back to the jest, a quest, mission, or adventure, referred to earlier. The subject of this message, whether it's Gregory, Freddy, Michael, Vanessa, whoever, is being told to put an end to whatever evil things are occurring at the Pizzaplex. This further suggests that the code is describing Gregory. At 6 a.m. when we reach the now open doors to the Pizzaplex, Gregory mentions how,
"If I leave now, nothing will change, will it? There will be more disappearances."
Yes, I am afraid that is correct.
This establishes that Gregory is aware that people are going missing at the Pizzaplex. Considering the lengths he goes to in order to stop this madness, I suspect that Gregory was pretty aware of what was happening at Fazbear's. The presence of this code reinforces that. If it really is referring to Gregory, it implies they're at least somewhat cognizant of how important it is to put an end to the Mega Pizzaplex. This leaves our final parsing of the code as, break and mend, I built the breath. They hunt now, drawn to life, not real. Still keen and frit and fraught with thought and zest and jest. No blunt woes. Dodge, duck, flash, shoot, crawl, run, crush the vile band. Cry not, try not, do not hold out hope. Your life, your aim, will save those with soul. It's still really weird and complicated, but I do think it was a little better. Alright, now let's theorize about it. Wait, we already did that part? There's a lot to unpack here lore-wise. On one hand, the author of this message seems to be on the side of good. They're encouraging someone, presumably Gregory, to put an end to the conspiracy at the Pizzaplex. However, we get weird lines like do not hold out hope and no blunt woes, and that makes me think that perhaps the author of the message is struggling to fight off some sort of outside nefarious influence. If Vanessa is Vanny, which is quite debatable right now, and as evidenced by the CDs, she's somewhat struggling with Afton's influence in her mind, that would sort of fit. Furthermore, the fact that this message had to be written in code at all suggests that the author needed to conceal it from someone. The question is, who? It was written in the hidden sister location room, deep in the bowels of the Pizzaplex. Who else is coming by there? I think the idea that the author needed to conceal the message from themselves is really cool. I'll just briefly mention that the code is found in the sister location room, which is associated with Elizabeth Afton, who is associated with Vanessa. So there may be some implications there. Still, I'm not the best when it comes to working with hyper-circumstantial evidence like that, and I'm not really comfortable hooking any theories to that idea yet. Who do you guys think wrote the code? Why do you think it needed to be written in code? Is there any significance to the fact that this is found in the sister location room? Who do you think the message is describing? It seems like Gregory, but with this series you can never know. Let me know in the comments below. Also, if you like FNAF and other spooky stuff like that, check out my recent video on Kane Pixel's new Backrooms analog horror series. It's definitely worth looking into. Thanks for watching.